It's another episode of Feed the Trolls, and obviously we just went right back to where we started. Today we're going to be talking about HooXi, and I actually said this off air. I am so screwed if HooXi ever retires from Counter-Strike, because he's basically the all-out content.
He's quite the draw right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I need him. He's getting us those views. We're going to be talking a little bit about G2. We got Moses joining us. You were casting.
To be fair, at least someone does nowadays. You know, I mean, at the moment. Bit awkward you say that, really. You know. So.
Fair point. Fair point. Moses, you were in Dallas. You got to cast that incredible final where G2 lifts the trophy without HooXi. That must have been quite fun for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sick final. Obviously, like it's probably the best final we've had this year. I'd probably say CS2 in general, probably the best final. I think most of them have been blowups recently. So, yeah, I mean, the tournament was fun. I think what was really cool about it is watching the final was like the culmination, but G2 like got better every game, every stage, and you could see like Niko getting more comfortable. You could see like Modesty was just incredible the whole way through. Stewie was getting a little bit better, you know, time and time again each match. So I mean, the whole team felt like it was just kind of stepping up as the tournament progressed. So by the end of it, yeah, that was a pretty sick performance out of them.
For sure. And obviously, I don't actually know who's responsible for this. I was under the impression it was Steele, who said it on the desk at some point.
Where he said the MVP.
Yeah, but then I just seen it on Twitter.
It'd have to be someone like him, to be fair, wouldn't it? Like, there's not that many people would say it that way as that. Or, you know.
You would.
It's true. I'll give him credit. He sort of was the standing for me there. Fair play. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
He said it once. Everyone and their mom has like copy pasted it. It was good. Yeah. I've seen it everywhere. But I mean, there we go, Thorin. You said it before. Now you've been vindicated. Apparently, HooXi needs to leave G2 if they want to lift trophies.
Here's the sad thing. What people won't know is when we're picking the guest for these episodes, obviously we try and tailor the guest to some degree to the topic. And one of the reasons I actually wanted Moses to be for this topic is because if people don't know, Moses obviously has, I mean, you could say a bias. He's just friends and knows Stewie 2K. So he obviously has a reason why this was a good thing for him and he likes it and all this jazz, right? Even though I will just say, as usual, Moses, why are you picking all the wrong people? He's the reason why you look like a fool as a coach. You know, you'd be coaching right now if it wasn't for that guy. But anyway, let's not get into that. Let's just put that back on the shelf. You know, where that old memory that we don't talk from that movie again, Moses. It's all good. But I will say this, I'm actually going to shock people now because people are going to expect that I'm just going to do the double down and do the Richard/Kassad take, right? Of like, look, it proves HooXi's garbage, right? But I actually think there's a way more nuanced discussion to be had here, which is the problem with that take is it's not a 1-for-1. Like Stewie 2K has been an in-game leader, but he wasn't the in-game leader of this team. So it wasn't just HooXi went out and Stewie was like, no, Niko IGL. So to me, there's actually a lot of moving pieces in this win. So actually it's not the case necessarily that this means HooXi is trash and the fact they didn't make any finals without him means like he shouldn't be in the team anymore. I would say actually the more interesting discussion is stuff like, forget is HooXi bad? Should Niko be IGL? That's like a very real discussion that you can actually have at this point in time. Because funny thing is, that's also an old by the numbers topic that we all drilled into the ground and we were all against it. But remember, that is like 4 or 5 years ago now, guys. Like it's been a long time. Like he's had a lot of time in his career to sort of develop. Also, in my opinion, you look at the team he has now, he has a very different squad. He doesn't have FaZe Clan of like international superstar. He has all his boys. He has people who he can communicate with very well. I also actually thought the reason the Stewie angle was cool in this tournament was Stewie 2K in the latter years of his career has just been like a hard entry pretty much. And you saw in this team, he actually understood Moses what stand-ins should do. It's a bit like when a coach does a stand-in. If a coach does a stand-in, you are just there to be beaten by people gardens. Like he never tried to take some sort of star role or space. What he basically did was actually like a comparable kind of job. HooXi also hard entries when he was on the team. Yeah. But the difference is it allowed Niko in a weird way to sort of control the team. And I also would guess, since he's been in an IGL himself, he probably had good secondary comms, probably was able to call. In fact, I thought Maui made a very good point on Twitter. It looked actually like the best thing Stewie did, essentially, even though there could be drilled to be a meme, like die in the right way, was he actually sort of knew how to get himself traded. He didn't just run in and die. He sort of knew how to do it. So like the timing's right. So the guy behind you can get the trade kill off, etc. And so as much as people don't want to hear it, I'm actually not that against HooXi on this move. I think it's more interesting, like the sort of possibilities it opens for G2. Like I feel like it's not just do you keep HooXi or not. It's things like maybe this is how Niko reinvents himself. Remember, he's had a long time since he's had those like crazy numbers he used to have in CSGO. So I think there's a lot here actually. It's not as simple, it's not as dry as people expect. I don't think this one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you can take the conversation, just because, like, for instance, I know, like, the conversation that Niko had, like, gave that interview being like, I want to switch into in-game leadership one day. And I know from speaking to him like 2 to 3 years ago, he expressed to me a desire at some point in his career to become an in-game leader.
Right.
So that's a cool one. I'll say, I think there's also a topic to have around Nexa, because he still had more than anyone, like, a very rough outing, some good clutches, a couple like really good isolated maps, but it's clear that in certain situations he's not like the lateral replacement for JKS that they kind of expected him to be. I think he's actually showed at this event a lot weaker in those scenarios. And he's come out and said this is the worst Counter-Strike he's played in a long time. So I'm glad I'm not the G2 general manager, because he's got some fucking decisions to make. He's got some conversations to be had. I think I said it before the event that I thought Stewie actually wasn't that bad of a stand. I said it over on our podcast, just because he plays some of the similar roles as HooXi on the CT side. He's going to be playing Banana. He's going to be playing with Niko on certain maps that are good for G2. And like, yeah, an entry fragger, but he's like a really good targeted impact player for the mid round. Like, he very much still understands the movement of the game and how the game shifts around him, and knows not only like how to make plays, it's when to make those plays. And I thought he did like a really good job of that throughout the event. I mean, you could obviously see the rust in his aim. There were some kills that like you'd see Stewie get 9 out of 10 times if he's back and more active. But yeah, I think this is going to be a really hard one for G2 to decipher. And I think more importantly too, would be the comments of m0NESY after they won the final, which talking about like the mental side of the game and the emotional structure of the team, and the belief that this thrown together team at Dallas had to like not fall out of games, to come back in maps, to force overtime on Inferno in the grand finals, to come back from 5-12 on Anubis, to force overtime and then eventually lose. But I think that's a topic of conversation too, which doesn't all stem from HooXi. That attitude and emotional state within a team is a team-wide thing. So that was something, by the way, Stewie improved like tenfold when he joined Liquid back in 2019 when they won that Grand Slam run. Is he changed the environment and attitude within the team. So I think that's equally important as well. So I think distilling it, I'm with you, Duncan, distilling it down to just HooXi, I think is like a really shitty kind of clickbaity way to think about things. That
I'll even give you another one. Even though, by the way, a spoiler, this is all set up. I do still think HooXi was fired. That would be like number 1 on my list. And I would still, but now I do. No, that's to make it. You go to the agile. I found like a way to sell it better. But I'll give one last devil's advocate point. It's not really that. It's just a legit point that should be made on HooXi's behalf. The other reason why you can't just say this proves HooXi's trash is because I doubt they went in and did the Men in Black device and said, right, delete everything HooXi did before from our grids. For all we know, they might have run like half the same playbook. Like Niko was there when they were playing with him. So for all we know, some of this might still be HooXi's strats. It might still be the same setups he had, but maybe Niko just triggered them because he was in the team before. So I do think that's an angle people are unfair about, because in my opinion, there's a concept I call the IGL hangover, where it's like if you fire an in-game leader, I think the same thing's happened to a bunch of teams in history. Sometimes you still win the next event afterwards, but it's because his playbook's still relevant. You don't just chuck it in the bin. You use whatever works still. And like, it's more like, if here's the problem. I would only know if it was HooXi that was bad if you did like the next month of tournaments or 3 more tournaments without him. Then I'd have a real sense of it. This one tournament alone can't give it. It just happens to be convenient for me because I already thought he was one of the people I would remove anyway, you know.
I think that I saw somewhere, there was an interview somewhere that one of the players said that HooXi was like instrumental in prepping for this particular tournament, and that he did a lot of involvements as well.
Oh, so I think
he was basically
some remote shit or something.
He was basically an analyst from home, so he was helping like Niko like the nights before with the setup. He was staying up late and watching some of the games and doing some footage and helping them with prep. So he was still involved on some level. I think the interesting thing too is like, I guess the first person you kind of that I'd want to talk to would be Hunter. Because like he had a massive jump up in performance for a year where he's looked like he's lost in CS2. His performance in Dallas was solid, and in fact, some maps incredible, and some very critical performances in maps they had to win. So I'd go to him and be like, what's up, bro? Like, why'd this happen? Was this something about leadership? Was it something about the pace of the game that Niko was controlling? Is it something about, you felt more freedom because of this for X, Y, and Z? Like, what is it that made your performance better? Because, I mean, again, you have about 5 different areas feeding into this HooXi conversation, and you need to figure out which ones are the most important so you can get that kind of a performance. Because we've seen tournaments this year already where Niko's having a good event, not as an IGL, obviously, and then m0NESY having like a stellar event again. Like it's been happening all year, and you haven't had Hunter there with him. You haven't had Nexa there with him. You haven't frequently had HooXi there with him, although sometimes HooXi's had some good game. But like, that's where you look at those guys and say, we're not going to win trophies if we're only 2 players deep. Like, how do we keep getting Hunter at this level is one of the most important conversations G2 has to have.
Here's a little bit of a curveball, though. Do you think that there's also a bit of a mental game at play here? So you're going into Dallas, you don't have your IGL, you've got to get a stand-in, you don't have a lot of time to prep. The pressure's suddenly gone. As a team, you're kind of like, listen, let's just do the best we can because this is what we've got. And then you just steadily get better throughout the tournament. As opposed to that like constant G2 must lift a trophy. It's almost like when they took the pressure away, everyone was a little bit more free. They started enjoying the game a bit more.
I think that's another very valid point that I've always tried to make on talk shows as well, which is it's the same concept that people might know for when you know the lineup's dead and you know that the guy's already leaving next week or after that. And sometimes people stand in for the last event. Like, actually, you're right. I think it just removes all like actual pressure because what happens is if you'd have failed and just got grouped here even, you'd go, it's okay. We didn't have our in-game lead. It's a really important part. And Stewie is barely playing. All those excuses, which actually now look awesome, like they would have been very valid. In fact, no one would, by the way, actually people wouldn't have hated on G2 in this particular event. In fact, actually, people might have argued the opposite. They might have argued doing badly means HooXi's really important. It could have even worked in their favor. So I do kind of agree. I do feel like in this tournament, they never actually in their brains had to have the thought, we might win it until probably the final, if I'm being mad. Like, I think they probably still thought Vitality beat them in the final. Like, so to me, I actually think in a weird way, yeah, it is true. Just like on that past episode, I did try to stress the idea that the reason why it isn't okay to be like in the semis if you're HooXi, it's because you play for G2. You're not in like the difference is if Mouse makes a final, that's dope. Like if you're G2, you're supposed to be like Real Madrid or the fucking Lakers or something, mate. So I do think the normal everyday pressure is really high on this team. And I think for this event, logically, there wasn't much of it. I even think actually as a final aspect as well, if you were going to have sort of a potential throwaway event where you don't know if you're going to do well or badly, also having it in America if you're getting Stewie 2K is pretty good. Like it's also sort of like a chill, fucking perfect home crowd environment as well.
Yeah, I'm curious how they picked Stewie, to be honest with you. Just, I mean, those factors all go with them. I think the visa factor of not having to worry about someone from Europe not getting in is a big one. Obviously, been friends with Niko for a long time, so that might have been an easy communicate. Yeah, it would be interesting to hear those thoughts. I think like with the HooXi conversation, I think it's really interesting that. Excuse me, the pressure conversation. I think that what's interesting about it is like you can't ever know, you can't quantify that. You can't ever know how much of an impact it had on them. And I think Niko spoke to that on the stage a little bit. It's like it's not like this relief of pressure. It's just like setting a goal that's not the finals. It's like their goal was to make the playoffs, and then let's see what happens from there. They wanted to be on the stage. So yeah, there's probably an element of that. It's hard to determine how much it is, but also like you better get over the pressure if that's really a problem for you guys. Like it's never going to leave. You have one of the best players of all time. You are an organization that's expected to win trophies. It ain't fucking going anywhere. So let's have that conversation now.
By the way, if you are also anyone in G2 who isn't Monacy, don't get too far aheady with the whole thing of like, hey, we can switch players. No, you also have like the best player in the whole world right now. And he absolutely smurfed even in the final. Like in the final, he was mega good. So that was, let's be real, a lot of the heavy lifting of why you won this tournament. Like the rest of the things about HooXi and Stewie 2K and TaZ, that's all some great side conversation. Like the main topic is like Monacy was fucking unbelievable as well. Like that's like the main reason you won.
It'd be interesting too. I think it'd be interesting too if HooXi, if we ever got like information on how much HooXi was providing in terms of like the analyst work and helping with the prep, because I mean, if you're G2, would you even think of in a world, let's say you're going over roster changes and you're thinking about replacing HooXi, is there ever a world where you just say, hey man, do you want to like coach or be an analyst or be on the back end? Like, why, it obviously worked. I think. By the
way, if you even look at that comment TaZ made after they won, it's almost inferred he wouldn't be against that. Like his comment was sort of like, it isn't about the X's and O's almost. It's about like the attitude. Well, I'll tell you what, TaZ's problem is, like he hadn't done coaching before. This is a new draw for him. So even though he has all that experience, no one knows yet how good is he at the X's and O's, how good is he at the tactical side. And he went into a team that's a
dumpster fire of emotional control. So
you wouldn't know anything about that. So
no, not at all. But yeah, no, that'd be kind of cool to see if I mean, the shitty thing about it is a lot of it is dictated by Niko. Like, tell me if Niko shows up to work tomorrow and says, you know what, I do want to be an IGL now. Like it's going to happen. That's just the power that Niko has, and it's not like a vindictive thing, and it's not like a controlling thing. It's just if I want to be an IGL, I'm going to be an IGL, and that's I think probably the scary.
The sickest thing I've realized. That's even. This is where I'm too honest, Moses. Like I don't play the sort of Game of Thrones and try and do like sneaky manipulation. I'm just kind of saying what I think, right? But I've realized I was wasting my time like a hamster on a wheel, trying to say publicly all these like smart reasons why you should probably replace HooXi or get better and give it. What I should have done instead is just been like the devil in like I should have been like Grimmer Wormtongue in the ear of Niko. Like Niko, you should probably stay in game lead, mate. I think it's your time, innit? You sort of got the game figured out. I mean, all those Balkan boy, they'd all follow you. They'd all follow you. And then the side result is Niko HooXi would get kicked anyway. But I should have just appealed to the God Emperor. My mistake.
You should. Yeah, Niko, your skills are slipping, baby. Those set shots ain't gonna last forever. Time to make the transition.
I'm actually sure that there is a line when we were talking about devices IGL where you still went, what's next? Niko IGLing. I'm pretty sure you actually called it. So I'll go find that. You were telling telling the fortunes of G2. I'm curious, does Niko have the temperament to IGL? Is this actually a move that we think he could make?
I'm going to say yes. Now we have early returns from Dallas, and like obviously when things are going well and you're on this fairy tale run, I think it's a lot easier. But I think from what Yanko was kind of mentioning to me, Niko was a lot better at controlling his emotions as an IGL because that responsibility is on him to control his emotions. Like you don't have an option when you're IGL. You have to have your emotions, control it in check, not only, to kind of have that attitude persuade throughout the team, but also to make sure you're constantly focused on what's coming next. Obviously, his career on the webcams and getting frustrated as a player is not exactly the most conducive to getting, believing that. But I would say that's a skill that would have to get developed. I mean, over time, right? Like any IGL, that's like a new skill that you have to develop.
I would say the thing, monitors and it works.
It's true.
Device has been punching monitors and he seems to be working just fine as IGL. So
the thing is, though, like what I would say on this topic is, like even when Niko in-game lead in FaZe, when they had those eras where they just didn't have a player and they kept cycling through the old guys and then he would keep taking the role over again. I always said, like, one of the best things he had was his individual game never fell off. He always looked fantastic still himself. In fact, if people don't know, he was still like a top 10 player in the world on HLTV every year he did this. But as well, the other issue was it made you think at the time in FaZe though, okay, but then maybe, it's like a blame F thing. Maybe he does awesome, but he doesn't do as good a job like micromanaging the others. He doesn't put as much attention. Well, the difference is I always used to think like he wasn't a bad in-game leader. I just think he called a simplistic game because he himself was such a brilliant player and such a cerebral player. He just wants like a default type game and then he does his shit, right? So I would say that's even why I suggested myself, maybe it's time for him to do it, because I think back on FaZe, he also had the players that were like that. They're all-star players that were on FaZe Clan in other teams. So on that team, you maybe can call a loose game. I would want him to be a bit more involved and be like a real in-game leader. I'll add device now where you're doing full-on tactics, because I think the one worry I would have when a superstar becomes an in-game leader is, are they going to understand what the plight is like for the worst player on your team, the one with no skill, the one who doesn't have like a crazy headshot aim, who can't just win every duel and doesn't necessarily know what to do with all these clutch scenarios? Because I'll give you the example of when I did an interview with Flosher. He totally admitted he probably should never have been an in-game leader for exactly that reason, which is, to him, he would look at a round and it was obvious what you should do. It was obvious you should make like a push here or like, but he quickly realized, my teammates aren't even thinking of that. That doesn't occur to them. That's not natural. In fact, I'd almost have to hold their hand to do it. So I think that's the question I would have is, how would he do with like Nexa? And I don't know if it would be HooXi or someone else, but how would he do with these other pieces that might sometimes Hunter, people that sometimes struggle in the game? How would he set them up? Because I have to say, another massive upside people are missing, if you want to contrast Niko and IGL and FaZe with this team, is look, Guardian was pretty good still when he was in FaZe, but mate, he wasn't Monacy. Like, that's the other thing. When you were Niko, you were IGLing and you were the star player. You were the best player in the team. Now, you aren't even the best player, mate. You'd also be IGLing, and this is why I actually could see Niko being good. Surely you, of all people, know how to set up superstars. You know what he wants. You know what to do when the game's going a certain way. I think, actually, I could see a world, they have a great relationship, it seems, where he could be really awesome piloting Monacy to some degree.
And it felt like individually for Niko, watching him throughout this event as IGL, he felt like he could be a little bit more targeted in when he made his move. Like, I feel like at various times he's like kind of overextended. Like, if you think back, I mean, this is an extreme example, but if you think back to the major semifinals against Na'Vi on Ancient towards the end when they were just getting destroyed, like he was really trying to force a fight at the top of B ramp. So I think he was really kind of going overboard and crossing that line to the point where like he wanted to be the one, he was trying to be the one to kickstart that half of Counter-Strike. And as IGL, he kind of got to wait and let everyone else kind of make some initial plays. And then he got to see how the dust settled after that. And he got to kind of make his targeted moves, which, I mean, you put Niko in a mid-round situation, like 3-on-3, 4-on-3, 3-on-4, where like some utility's already been spent. He's super fucking dangerous in those scenarios. So I thought it was kind of cool watching him, because it even felt like this just by feeling, and this might've been like the excitement of the event and everything, but it felt like this was one of Niko's better events individually in some time. In my mind,
CS2 especially, yeah,
for sure.
It's difficult though, right, to actually break this down, because I worry that we're looking at one event and there's so many moving parts that ensured that G2 got this victory. So yes, HooXi wasn't there, but also, and yes, Niko was IGLing, but also m0NESY was popping off, and it felt like some of the other players were having a good time as well. So I mean, is it a matter of so simple as let's just change this one thing? So like, let's just change it, Niko calls from here on out. I mean, I don't think that that's the big fix for G2 long term.
To me, you still have to eventually probably sign like another. It doesn't have to be a star player in the sense of like crazy rip, but you probably have to add some more firepower, is what I think. Like the one part as to why actually the mini drama of the event was just like Richard criticizing Stewie 2K and then also Launders criticizing Nexa is because those players, even though they won the event, had incredibly low stats in terms of the overall event. Like normally, if you have one of those players, you won't win an event. So the idea they won with two, that's why I say a lot of the credit also has to go to m0NESY. Essentially, he played like 1.5 players. So
Navi did it at the major.
That's true. It can happen every now and then, but then again, that's why everyone says it's a fluke, though. To be fair, you know. So that's the one concern I have is like, one, this probably isn't replicable. Like, you probably can't win with players playing that, and also you're asking a lot of m0NESY to play that every event. And then the other thing is, like, realistically, what's the basis of the team? What m0NESY kills 3 people and the others collectively kill 1.5? Like, what, you know, that's not a game. So to me, you probably eventually need some firepower more anyway. That's why actually I do agree when we did the HooXi episode. It's not only at this point a HooXi topic. The HooXi topic for me was more in CSGO, where it was like, hey, if you had this team of like star players with JKS, more like if you put in Snappy or maybe they just win the major immediately. That is a different convo to what they do in CS2 because the team is fundamentally different in CS2.
I mean, to the point on m0NESY, I mean, I thought this before the event, but for me, he's the best player in the world. I know there's like that conversation between m0NESY, ZywOo, Donk, and I know a lot of people lend themselves a different way depending on their perspective or how they want to look at the game. m0NESY, to me, hands down, is the best player in the world, and I don't even think it's particularly close, to be honest with you. He's gotten so comfortable within his skill set. There was one round on Anubis. I think it was against Vitality in the finals. It could have been one of the other playoff series, but there was one round where he was boosted in mid to grab a pick on T side over the smoke. Grabs the pick. They drop down into canals, and as they're taking canals, he's like the second player in with his op, and he trades both of his teammates in towards dark, like with the op, mid-range, close up, trading kills, combat opping, and then as he comes out dark, like 10 seconds later, he's like a crawling lurk to clear out the bomb site because he knows there's one more defender. And I'm like, you just switch into 3 different skill sets and philosophies in a progression of a round, and you just destroyed everyone. 4th kill, by the way, was ZywOo holding an angle with an AWP up on platform. So, like, for me, I don't see any other player who has that level of versatility in his game, especially within one single round. Like it was crazy to watch. And then you add in like incredibly clutch, like oddly clutch,
ridiculous,
and he has been since the start of his career, and he does it with style. Like I don't know, I don't see how there's a player that anyone can think is better than him in my mind. Like,
by the way, on the latter part, the part about the clutch, I'll update that because it's another one if people don't know, which is last year ZywOo was the player of the year on HLTV. He probably was. He was the best player in the world over last year. He had something mad like 4 1v3 clutches over the year, and then the joke is m0NESY's had that in like single tournaments this year. Like it's just that crack. So I agree with Moses. The reason why he is the best player is actually you can start with his team. I also think compared to his team, like first of all, Donk actually has the best team set up. The whole team's focused around him, how he plays, people there to trade for him, to set him up, to flash him in. It seems like the whole game runs through him. So I don't take anything away from his performance, but I do think compared to the other two have a little bit more free agency in what they do. ZywOo's case, I mean, the joke is he and his teammates all the time discuss this topic of like maybe he's still figuring out the role and how much aggressive should be, when should he rifle. m0NESY, there's none of those discussions. The discussions are just why doesn't he have a better team? Why hasn't he won? Like I think right now, even though he's so young in age, it looks like the complete package. Like you said, Moses, he can entry, he can just be your aggressive AWPer, he can do the no scopes, he could just have it. By the way, he could easily just do a normal device type game if he wanted to. It's just why would you? And then as you say, he also just happens to be clutch as well and win a load of clutch at the end. Like what more would you ask from the guy? And quite frankly, I said this on the HooXi episode. The most impressive thing to me is Vitality is supposed to win every event. They're in most of the finals and the semis. Spirit, at one point, looked like a super team. If you're in G2, you've had all these problems. Everyone's discussed all these problems. And one, not only are you not a problem, but you perform regardless. Like, it doesn't matter how a HooXi does or a Niko. This guy just frags out seemingly every game. It's actually crazy. How with you, Moses? Like, the stats might say it's a really close discussion. Right now, I think you have to give it to m0NESY, especially when you consider Donk's sample size is about like half or a third at this point in time. She doesn't got as many maps. So I think m0NESY has to be crowned.
Yeah. That's for me.
I agree. I think m0NESY is the best player in the world right now. And I also think that a lot of the playoffs G2's found themselves in is actually because of him and not because of the rest of the team, because they haven't.
Oh, for sure.
is the change now in G2, if you're G2 management, taking a step back and going, okay, let's sit down with m0NESY and build a team around him. What does he need to succeed? Because clearly if he's firing on all cylinders, that works for us. Or is that a dangerous place to play in?
What would you think, Moses? What would you do?
Oh, God, I would hate being G2's manager right now. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to see if there's an opportunity out there to replace Nexa. I think that's the first place you go. And it's not to be a dick. I like Nexa. I like his game.
Check your Twitter after this comes out.
Yeah, Donna's coming for you, Brady.
Yeah, I know. And it sucks, but this is the part of the job that sucks is right. Like saying I would do this, but like honestly, like the performance just isn't there. And it's not even like overall stats. It's like even watching him play anchor positions, like anchor and pit should be like a really strong position, a really effective position. I think he struggled with it at times. I think whether it's like a temporary loss of his game, there's too much because you can't use that excuse for, Niko at the start of CS2, Hunter through this phase through CS2, and now Nexa as well, and just think it's all fine. They're going to bounce back. Something has to be done. I think that switch away from JKS has turned out to not be the right play. So I think you look for a new anchor in those positions and someone you can kind of bring in to mold as an anchor, however you want to approach it. And then you kind of continue to see how Hunter's going to be playing. But if you're m0NESY, I think you have to be, it's kind of a dangerous place because as far as I know, his contract ends at the end of this year. But like, if you look at it, you have like a superstar rifler, and Niko is one of the best of all time. You have Hunter, who throughout his career has been a really smart, intelligent, impactful lurker outside of this transition to CS2. You have some really good pieces with this team. And like, it's about finding those like finishing touches. I think the anchor position would go a long way, but I don't even know. Cause if you are G2, you are kind of panicking at the moment. Like we have to keep m0NESY here. Like if m0NESY leaves, I don't know what that team is. And as you said, like he's been the most impactful piece to them getting to the playoffs. It's not for m0NESY. This year is an absolute train wreck for G2. So like you need to do everything you can to get G2 settled for the future and to make sure m0NESY's happy and comfortable for the future as well. And I think you start with one piece and you see how the rest of the year is going with HooXi, and you kind of go from there and you just kind of evaluate it as you go, as you lead up to the Shanghai Major.
It's funny if you think about it, that the reputation of Niko is he's the God Emperor and he gets everything his way. Because as I pointed out on the HooXi episode, the story goes that they absolutely were going. He was almost gone. He just had to sign the dotted line. They were going to sell him to Falcons. And I can't blame them because actually that would be the perfect time. They would have been right, it turns out, to switch horses. Like if you have to take care of one player and build the whole right, you build around m0NESY now. I'm sorry. Niko was a truly great player. Might still have a few years left in the tank at the top level. But the difference is, as we're saying right now, he's almost the perfect player. Like you'd have to, the first thing if you're G2 literally is absolutely go to this player because you've heard the rumors about the things he said on stream about maybe he's going to go elsewhere from his friends, etc. And obviously it doesn't help your team that you're an international team. He's Russian, speaks Russian, and right now Russian CS is straight fire. Like that doesn't help. And you've heard VP and they clearly have money in the transfer market. So I agree. The first thing I would do is I'd just go to m0NESY. I'd basically find out where his head is at. What would we need? What would you want the team to look like in a year? What sort of a team do you like? How do you want to play? Because once you get that piece sorted, like you said, then you can build the rest. Because the problem is, if you go the other way, you could keep every other player, but if that player leaves, you're back at square one. Like, in fact, I'm trying to think, even if you brought in, the joke is I like people like Dexter, but even if you placed Dexter tomorrow into m0NESY's spot, you wouldn't be anywhere close to this. No. So I think probably basically your team would be like 11th best in the world immediately. So you've got to have this guy. It's like number one. It's like number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 priority.
I think too, like it can kind of be an interesting conversation because I think I would approach it like a little bit differently too. Like I wouldn't necessarily go directly to m0NESY. The first thing I would do, I think, is go to Niko, and I'd say, look, bro, you got, like, as you just said, Duncan, like, hey, you still probably got a couple years left in the tank as like a really powerful star rifler. We want you to win a major in a G2 jersey. You don't have it yet. We want you to win it here. And you have m0NESY with you. And that automatically gives us a boost and a good leg up to chase after the next 2 to 3 majors that we have. What do you think this team needs? Is it you IGLing? Is it a better performer in this position? Is it someone different in this position? What do we need to do? Like, you have all the experience in the world. You've been in all these different lineups. You've been around since 2016 at the top level of Counter-Strike. What do we need in this team to build it so that you can win your major in a G2 jersey together with m0NESY? And I think if you can secure Niko down that philosophy, I think that goes a long way to making sure m0NESY is going to be happier and comfortable, because they obviously have a relationship between the two of them that's pretty unique and pretty special, I would imagine, between the two of them. And you kind of make sure that you have both of your stars locked in, and that's the path that you stay in moving into the future.
Do you think we actually see any changes in G2 though for the next few months? Just because I feel like they've been you think so? They've buttoned down so hard on keeping what they've got. Do you think now they'll change it after Dallas?
I also get the sense though, like I alluded to this on the past one, I'm not certain, but I get the sense that like a bunch of the contracts are up in a few months or sometime this year. So if that's true, I also feel like if you're G2, you're also just sort of waiting it out. You're sort of seeing what happens at the end and then you're making the hard decision. So I also think as well, in the modern day, everyone now, the good news is we finally got the sort of season approach we want just because of the stickers from the bloody major. So I think actually for me, if I had to guess, look, this win probably gives you potentially a bit more life, but after the Shanghai major, if you don't win or go really deep in that, I think it's almost certain the lineup isn't the same. I don't think they get to the end of this year with this 5-man lineup. That was my guess.
I mean, I think it might even. I have to. In my head, I feel like it's going to have to come sooner than that. I think it'll be interesting because God, if you want to talk about pressure on G2, talk about pressure on HooXi. London's what, in 3 days, 4 days? Like you get like a direct comparison from like 1 week to just a week later. Let's see what you guys got with everyone back in the team and how it functions. And if London, for whatever reason, goes poorly, I think, you go into an extended player break with that kind of a bad feeling of winning a championship with Niko IGL as a stand-in, HooXi come back, Niko back to his regular role, and things are crap. I think you have those 4 weeks off after that, and I think there'd be a lot of conversations during that time off, a lot of really tough conversations. So I think London might dictate a lot in terms of the pacing, but I would bet a lot that there's going to be a roster change before Shanghai.
The actual danger if you're HooXi is what you're describing. It's just that you go to London and then people hear you call again and then they decide there was something different how Niko did it or they preferred that. That's where I think the genesis of the idea will really come from, that you make the hard switch. Because like I say, right now you can do all the bullshit. There's no pressures. If you come with the real team again, you just have to be judged on your merits.
And it's happened a number of times over the years where G2's even publicly commented HooXi as an IGL is one of those people who's very much in his own head and very much has sometimes self-confidence issues. It was a year ago at Dallas in 2023 where he was walking around like, just beat up and obviously sad. And there were some external reasons for that as well. But it was the whole thing where the G2 players were giving interviews like, we fucking love HooXi. Like we have told him a number of times, we love his calling. We love his impact on the team. We love the way he does strats. This is all kind of a beast of his own making and of public making. They've been very publicly positive in defending him in different scenarios over the years, but he is someone who gets in his own head a little bit. And I would imagine now's probably the time that gets to a fucking breaking point.
By the way, even though this has nothing to do with reality and what's going to happen, I have to reference what I think is one of the funniest things Kassad has ever said, which is on Hot Take Point Made. One of his hot takes. I don't even know how this is a hot take. It's just a mental thing to say out loud. He just said, because we've done so many takes about HooXi should be fired, replace HooXi, all the Nexa should be fired, whatever. His eventual hot take, the hottest of hot takes, was that if HooXi remains in the team, he will just stop talking to Niko. So now he's like using his friendship with Niko. It's like, in a way, I love Kassad because I actually love how mad he is. Like that's such an amazing take in it. I know
it's
it's
such a ridiculous thing to say.
I'm just going to tag our friendship completely. I love it.
As if Niko's like, all right, fair play. Now's the time.
Sorry, HooXi, you're out, mate. I know. I love
Can't not have that coffee with Kassad, so you got to go. But here's the thing: if they bomb in London, surely the scapegoat then is HooXi. And from what we're chatting about, I get the feeling we don't necessarily think that HooXi is the one that has to go. But if they don't perform, that is going to be probably the move during the play.
It's why I brought up that for me, the fact that it's not just they did it once, but it actually seems like it could be viable, and maybe he's ready, like Device, to step into being the IGL. The Niko angle is the sexy one, because if the Niko angle is correct and he can be the in-game leader, now it totally changes who we can recruit. Because before that, everyone's playing that game of like, yeah, but HooXi has them sort of top 5 in the world, so unless you can get Carrigan, that they do that game where unless I can get like the 3 best IGLs, then I can't ever replace him. If Niko really wants to be the IGL, then at that point, even if I'm replacing HooXi, it's not for an IGL. I'm potentially getting maybe I'm getting a SUE2K type player who's going to do all the entry. And by the way, I'd also be totally cool doing a 2-man move. I'd remove Nexa too as well. I'm with you. I'd just get a strong anchor who's got some firing skills, win some clutches. Again, basically a JKS. Doesn't have to be JKS, obviously, but someone in that vein. We've seen it worked. It was awesome. So to me, I think that actually the cool thing about the event wasn't just like, do we replace HooXi? I think it actually did open potentially more options. Like, there's a lot of angles you can go. As long as you keep Niko, Monacy, and probably Hunter, you can work with the rest. You can do a lot of things, I think.
I think the HooXi as a scapegoat is certainly going to be like the public conversation and like the media conversation, the social media conversation from fans. And then I think it's going to be up to G2 to once again kind of close ranks and kind of defend him. I think the real danger is if, they've done that a number of times over the years, like I mentioned, but if they are the ones who have lost faith and they're not kind of closing ranks around him and shielding him from that criticism and kind of insulating him from it, then it turns into a big problem. So yeah, it'll be weird to see, and it's all about how G2 kind of handles that to make sure that HooXi feels as comfortable and confident with his position as humanly possible. And I mean, they've kind of set it up and done the right thing. TaZ, I think, came out before Dallas even happened and said, this doesn't change anything. No matter how we do in Dallas, HooXi's still going to be our IGL. So
the problem with that, Moses, is it's easy to make that comment before you've played the game and you don't think you're going to win. When you actually win the tournament, like even he would have to admit that. It does change a little bit,
He said all the right things.
By the way, I'll tell you what's fucked up as well. I actually, because from knowing him just from shores, HooXi, I know him a little bit. I've DM'd him a few times. He actually does seem like one of the few people who's cool enough. I could believe he still put his total best effort into being a remote analyst.
100%.
But I can't lie. There's a part of you, if you're him, is sort of like, it was a great tournament, guys, but come on, Vitality, just win that third map for fuck's sake. Make it a great, Pi is at least thinking that, come on, I'm bloody come on, match up.
Rooting for fucking ZywOo.
I know.
His Vitality
Dude, he was the biggest ZywOo fan ever on map 3. Exactly, yeah. He was like, look, honestly, you'll get the next year. Come on, ZywOo, number 1 in 2024.
Jesus Christ almighty. As if ZywOo laid down that stinker in the third map.
That was wild, wasn't it? It's the idea that the final was like HLTV forum narrative heaven. It's like no HooXi, Stewie 2K comes back and wins, so we're all just forgetting all the last 2 years. And then also ZywOo sucks and is a fraud apparently. Like, come on, guys, we've got to fucking calm down. Like, it just wasn't result at all.
Maniac shit in his pants somewhere.
Oh, the idea as well that Maniac, by the way, I can't even handle Moses, that they actually already did that ZywOo was a fraud skit right on the timing of this event, bro. Like, mate, the whole thing of him being the lawyer representing, it's like, mate, you got your work out for you in that final, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, record the sequel, baby, let's roll.
But by the way, shout out to ZywOo for actually agreeing to do that piece, because that Bruce was brutal. Yeah, that was fire. That was like something we do at Flashpoint, mate.
It was fucking good. They fucking nailed it.
They did. Their content was banging for Dallas. But a lot of the players will say that they don't. I know that they always say this. Oh, we don't pay attention to the forums. We don't do it. Bullshit. Like, we've all seen them on their phones. We know that they're checking it out. So how the hell does HooXi not get in his head? Because the whole of the internet is telling you that you are now the problem. And this is especially relevant because your team has lifted a trophy without you coming into London. How the hell do you not let that influence you in some way? And that pressure we spoke about earlier.
Yeah. Here's the thing that's like... There. Here's the thing that's a bit unfair. Is like, obviously there's a world, like, put it this way, I wouldn't, but I could argue right now, if you look at the results of Vitality, shouldn't Apex be on the hot seat? Like, look how many tournaments they've had. They haven't won any of them this year. He himself has one of the best players. But the difference is, it's a bit more pointed, the whole HooXi thing, partly because it's become more personal. Kassad was on the broadcast. It became a thing between him and Kassad. Then it's become a thing between him and Richard. So part of his problem as well is, he doesn't just have the fan people on the forums. He has like big figures in the scene as well who have sort of gone in for him or got him in his crosshairs. So to me, if this is where, even though that might seem unfair, it's fair in this sense, which is, as I said, if you are in one of the biggest sports teams in the world or some giant org that's supposed to win, that's kind of the pressure anyway. Like, the pressure really is win or you get fired eventually anyway. So what I would say if you're HooXi is this. The good news is this is where you could show you have amazing mental fortitude, though. You could actually sort of earn yourself some credit in some ways, because I'll tell you what, if you actually did now win and turn it around in this pressure cooker, I would even have to give you a lot of props, actually. Like, there's a lot of people would sort of mentally wilt or they'd lose. They didn't even use this as an excuse, by the way. They'd be like, I was under so much pressure and people hating on me, scrutinizing. So if you can win in spite of that, I will say you get extra points. So I'd just spin it that way. If you're HooXi, spin it like Moses talked. Make it like a us against the world thing. Like, if I'm HooXi and TaZ, who've both been criticized, or maybe even Nexa, you get together and you do that actively. You say, hey, fuck it. These people want us to fail. They think we're going to lose. So we're not going to do that. We're going to stick together and we're going to work on it and we're going to come through. And at the end, we'll have the last laugh. I think you got to spin it that way a bit.
I think if you're HooXi, you probably, after they won Dallas, you probably delete Twitter, delete Instagram, delete every piece of social media off your phone.
Oh, definitely.
delete Reddit, whatever it is. Don't go to the website. Take it off your fucking whatever.
Just get that person who does Zero's tweets where it's like, hello, I'm having a great day and I hope all you guys enjoy it. It's like, has Zero even got Twitter? Like, there's no way he did that. Like, just get that guy to tweet on your account. I know,
it's the way his Twitter reads like a Google Translate.
I know.
Great. But like that, I think that's what you do if you're HooXi, and you just bury yourself in the game and you grind your ass off for this next week individually in preparation. You grind your ass off as an IGL and come prepared, and you come focused and listen to what the teammates had said about like the atmosphere and the mood and the environment within the team, and you try and bring that kind of energy to the team game in, game out, and you fucking just go for that trophy. Just bury your head in the sand and just target the trophy. That's it.
By the way, if you want some real advice, even though it might even be true, but you can decide, HooXi, here's actually a genius move. If you do at all decently at this next event, let's say making the semis or something, what you do in the interview is you say, like, oh, what I did was I actually watched, obviously, a lot of what they did at Dallas. So I took some of it, improved it a little bit, and sort of do some shit like that's genius. That's PR. Like, the sad thing is, HooXi, if I wasn't against you, mate, just fucking call. I could fix this whole thing, but, unfortunately, I'm on Kassad's side. I'm the Donna to Kassad's Nexa in this analogy. By the way, speaking of which, here's the next piece of content, ESL. You're going to do a parody remake of the music video of Tupac, Me and My Girlfriend, featuring Nexa and Donna. Because I tell you what, she is a ride or die, and I appreciate that.
I was about to say, I have a great business strategy for HooXi. Like, I'd hire Donna to like reply to all my tweets, and then just farm the engagements.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, think about it. Farm the engagements, make some extra cash on the side. Like, that's the play. I actually really loved how she supported him, though. I'm like, I want someone like that in my corner.
Also, if people don't know, I just want to clear this up. Remember, English is her second language. She's obviously German, right? When she said ugly to Launders, she meant ugly in the sense of like disgusting, She didn't mean he is actually ugly. Like, by the way, he's actually pretty good looking, obviously. But I will say that is also fire. Like, if I were him, I would definitely drop the boxer ugly, ignorant hater line. ASAP. Like 100%. Mate, 100. I'd buy that 100%. Come on.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, like there was an entire Twitter drama. Brilliant. If you missed it, I'm very disappointed in you, but go check out Launders' feed.
I just love the fact of all people, Moses. Think about people like me, Richard. There's so many spicy people.
The nicest
Launders is like the most tame thing he said as well.
I know, he said
I don't think he did that well. I know. He's just going straight out of him. I love it.
Yeah, I respect it, but man, if I'm Nexa, I'm going to her and I'm like, baby, don't tweet that shit. Don't do that. Let's not go into that one.
Put your phone down. You brought him up earlier, but I actually wanted to bring this conversation to TaZ as a coach, because we speak a lot about all the things that G2 needs to fix. Is TaZ the right coach to take them to the Shanghai Major?
You've picked the perfect person to ask, though, Sam, because here's the thing. Moses is the go-to example that people have often used for this phenomenon, which is the problem is, Moses, people, I'll give you the sports analogy. In football right now, soccer in Europe, it's very rare, no matter who you are, even if you're the greatest player ever, you almost never go straight into like a head coaching gig. What you normally have to do is you either have to be like assistant coach or you coach like a way smaller team. Like you go to like a tiny team and then people see like without much risk, like, are you actually good at coaching? And then what happens is if you're good, then you get the big gig. Then you go to Real Madrid or Manchester United. So the problem I've always thought Henry had as a GM, Kassad had to some degree. A lot of the problems, obviously TaZ now is if you're going to switch from being really good in another field, you don't want to just take the small gig. You don't want to go coach like M80, for example. You want to, if you take it, you want to go shoot for the stars. Like you were Team Liquid, obviously now TaZ with G2. But the problem is, it means that the pressure and the learning curve is going to be insane. Like you basically have to, you have to basically win within like 3 months, or people are going to ask for you to be fired. So isn't that part of the issue? Is like it's incredibly high stakes to go into a top job, right?
Sure, and I think TaZ would have a little bit of a benefit over me having won a major and won trophies and competed in CSGO. So he has a little bit of like automatic, probably more respect from the players in terms of his in-game side of things. But I mean, at the end of the day, CS2 and like meta shifts happen so fast, and if you are not on top of that as a coach, and especially a coach like him that didn't go directly from his playing career, right? He like streamed for a little bit. He was doing, I don't know what TaZ was doing for a while, but like the pickup of the meta and the change and individually what the players have to experience and around the different sets of utility that they go up against, the different reactions to that utility that they have in their toolbox. It depends, because TaZ, I think, would be a good coach for the mental side of the things. I think he's going to help improve that probably right out of the gate. And he's a very strong unifying personality as well, which is helpful. But there is a certain extent to where if he's not up to date on the meta and the strategy of the game and the details that the players discuss the game into, then you do kind of get end-arounded by the players, not maliciously, but just naturally, because they don't have that respect for your knowledge to be able to contribute on the level that they need. And that's where I think sometimes that kind of lack of respect kind of really starts to affect that relationship. It happened with me and Liquid for sure. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you, if he's the right coach for it. I think he's doing an okay job. I think the question is, do they have an analyst who can pick up the pieces in that direction? Obviously, if you have HooXi, like he was helping out in Dallas, picking up those pieces, is that what he does naturally? Or like Kerrigan does with FaZe, where he pretty much does all the fucking work because he's a psychopath? Like, you can actually work in those kinds of situations. So it depends a lot on the constitution of the team. But I'll say, obviously, we haven't really seen that impact from TaZ quite yet to make some kind of a shift within the team to make their performances consistently stronger. So I guess that's kind of a long non-answer in a way. I didn't mean to do that like that, but okay. I will say there's room to have that conversation for sure. I mean, G2's got a lot of hard conversations going ahead of him right now.
Like, I will just put it this way. In light of what I said earlier, if I'm going to hold HooXi to the standard, like, you're in G2, you're supposed to win, then by that logic, maybe TaZ hasn't been good enough yet, right? I don't know. I mean, I look at the team, they have a lot of problems. A lot of players are quite flawed. Aside from basically Modesty, everyone has some sort of an issue. Like, Niko's game isn't quite as good. The others are a little bit lost to the source, maybe. Some of them haven't updated to CS2. So my problem is this. I'll phrase it this way. Even though I like TaZ, I don't mind flaming people. I'll just say, thus far, he hasn't impressed me. I haven't looked and thought, wow, you're an incredible coach. Like, there's people like that I've seen just a few months in, they must be good at it. But I'll phrase it this way. But I'm going to give him room where if he can turn, especially if he turns around with this coach, again, I will give him massive props, just like I would with HooXi. If he can win with this team, then he probably has shown me something. He probably has turned something around, probably has changed something over time.
I guess in my mind, I would say like the better question to get at the heart of this would be like, what's the priority? What's like in the list of problems that G2 has, where's TaZ on that list? Is he like top 3? Is he like 5? Like when you go down like the in-game leadership of HooXi, Nexa's performance, Hunter's underperformance this year, does Niko want to IGL? Like, where does TaZ as a coach fall into that kind of list? Like, what priority is he for the team? Because I would place, finding a way to get better performance out of the roles that Nexa plays would be a pretty fucking top priority. I think Hunter's consistency would probably be up there. I fall more on the side where I actually think HooXi's a better IGL than he gets credit for and does good things. Okay. So I mean, that would probably be 3 for me, and him, that one and Niko are kind of tied together. So I mean, TaZ for me is like 4, 5, 6 on like the list of G2 needs to kind of address.
Why do you think HooXi is a better IGL than he gets credit for, Moses?
I like the way he talks about the game. I think when I speak to him about Counter-Strike, I think it all makes sense, and you can tell there's some clear thought into it. I lean a lot, and I accept kind of a lot of what the players say, both publicly and behind the scenes, that they like his in-game leadership and he does good work. I think he comes in very well prepped and prepared. Whenever I've talked to him, he's very up to date on how teams are playing maps in certain situations, in certain scenarios. And I think overall, I think, winning Cologne and Katowice last year, I don't think like he should have some fucking credit built up in the bank for those 2 wins. And they've stayed, by the way, it's not like this team has like dropped off under his leadership. Like, even still, when we see them not playing their best Counter-Strike, they're still reaching semifinals of the major. Sure. They're still going deep in playoffs and Katowice, they're not in Katowice, but they're still, making runs, ESL Pro League, they're still having success. And a lot of that, you can point to Modesty and Niko as having good impact and providing that, but you don't get that without an in-game leader who's at least doing a good job. I think more than anything with G2, what I feel like is happening isn't the strategies or the tactics going bad. I think it really is the team mentally is fragile and weak. And I don't think they've established a consistent way to come into a game emotionally focused on the task at hand, emotionally focused on winning. And that's when you start to see the phrase kind of come out in close matches. So I think a lot of it comes down to, and this is where TaZ would have a big job to do, and it's one thing I tried to do in Liquid, but didn't know how to connect with the players well enough to actually change it, is get those players coming in every day, not just prepared for the tactical side of things, but to be so like mentally focused on the game that nothing else fucking matters. Like, I don't care that something went wrong, that somebody missed a flashbang. That round happened. Focus on the next round. You can't change that. You can change the next round. You can change winning the next set of rounds. You can change the way the match, comes out in terms of the next 3 rounds and playing out for the rest of the half. Like, those are all things that I want the players to be focused on more so than this strategy didn't work or someone made a mistake here. Those things are going to fucking happen in Counter-Strike. And I think, that's a team coming together to make that mentality and that emotion kind of stick with. And it's not just pared down to the in-game leader and the coach. coach.
Damn, that's hard to fix though. Like that's a hard thing to actually fix. I don't even know where you would start.
That's why, unfortunately, it is the easiest thing to say, just change the player, because the reason why player changes, even though people don't want to hear about them, are better, is you can sometimes literally just move the player as the issue, and maybe the guy you recruit doesn't have it. But obviously, that's a very cynical approach. Like, if you want to win with this group, it's going to be hard. Like, one of the things I have to say about the HooXi anglers, by the way, I'm not Kassad. I don't know if people are aware of that. Like, I know we're both older guys with beards who rant about stuff, but like, one, I don't mention Niko being the best all the time. And then two, I'm just not Serbian, am I? So, but the reason I bring that up is because people always conflate our opinions. Like, I actually didn't think HooXi should even be fired until CS2 when they weren't getting any results. I always said, each time you win a massive event like he did, by the way, the one thing he never gets credit for is that first Blast World one. I don't think Blast World's a huge tournament, but he won it when like his fucking dad had died like right before the tournament. That is fucking gangster. I give him full marks for that one. You aren't even expected to win that one, mate. So that one's super legit. And then Katowice and Cologne are like the third and fourth best tournaments of the year. We only had one major last year. So each time he won one of those, I was like, right, that buys you another half a season. You get to the next major or the next Katowice, and he kept winning. So on that point, the point I'm making is I don't ever think HooXi was a bad in-game leader. Like that angle when people are like, he sucks, he doesn't know what to, you're just probably a massive Modesty fan or a HooXi hater. My issue is just, are you good enough to win with this group? I think that's the question I ask. So for me, he hasn't done that good a job thus far. And the one thing I worry about with this specific group of players is he's obviously Danish, and if you ever see him do media, except for when he was being spicy with Kassad, he's not a very confrontational person. He actually seems like a very chill, sort of even-keeled character. And the only thing I worry about is I do think when you have massive personalities like Modesty, Niko, by the way, Hunter actually, even though he's quite a chill person on camera, can be quite a big personality behind the scenes. I've heard he has a lot of sway in that team. I also think there's sort of the locker room control aspect of being a captain and a leader. Like I could believe HooXi's doing a job calling the tactic on the round or doing his part, but I don't know if he controls it. Because the one concern I've had about this G2 team is they don't just lose. They lose and they have, as we say in English, a face like a slapped arse. They just lose and it's sort of like, no. And it seems like the downer vibe when they lose is really disturbing to me. So I was sometimes, by the way, this could also bleed into TaZ's job, which is why it's quite tricky. They added TaZ too, isn't it? Like, you notice the problem with this situation is, like I say, if you were back in the JKS lineup, it was simple. G2 needs to win the major. Maybe they can replace HooXi and they've already got JKS. This one now is like you pull it apart and everything's connected. There's about 4 or 5 different things leading into each other.
Yeah, and I think too, like for me, I think one thing that kind of saved HooXi in CS2 at the start of the year, because as you mentioned, the results weren't great, but also for me, I was like watching games and I was just like, what the fuck is this guy supposed to do? Like Hunter's just disappeared. Like Hunter barely was playing the game for the first like 4 or 5 months. The roster change with Nexa coming in for JKS was there. Niko for, I mean, less time than Hunter, but he too basically disappeared compared to what he provides. So it's like, what kind of magical in-game leader do people expect HooXi to be at the start of CS2 when his like the main engine of his team, 2 of the most important fraggers on the team, just can't kill anything? Like
those are 2 top 20 players the previous year.
Yep. And it's mental to think about. So for me, like this whole year, I haven't given like HooXi necessarily a pass, but I don't focus my attention on HooXi as the IGL because I think that's a pretty, for me, that felt like just like a really silly kind of conversation. I don't know that like, also with like the roster change stuff, like I think one thing that people, especially the public, because the fans don't have to think about it from this angle at all. And so in some sense, fair play, but also I wish they would just kind of imagine it. But like, there's so much more into a roster change than just saying this player is better. Some orgs at a certain time don't have the money to go out and pay a buyout for a player. Like the roster changes are not as simple as like, why don't they just get this guy for this guy? There are different periods where orgs can make those kinds of changes. And I think that kind of detail to it too is like a little bit crazy. That
also buyouts are mental at the moment. They're really crazy, guys.
Fucking insane.
Really crazy.
I remember when we brought Fallen in, I had to like write a letter to the investors of Team Liquid and like support of the, like, you have to like do things to like say
that alone justifies you being fired, but keep going. So.
But you know, like you have to do things, like you can't just like make it like snap your finger and a roster change materializes.
Sure.
So I don't know.
So we've all made mistakes, Moses. It's all good. I did a few tweets, but every now and then.
You know, I'll stand by the Fallen one. I still to this day don't feel like the Fallen move was a mistake, even though it didn't fucking work out. But I would stand behind that one.
There we go.
On that bombshell.
Yeah, on that bombshell.
Final question though. I mean, obviously all G2 fans want is for this team to lift a major trophy, right? That's it. That's what they want. Shanghai major. How does G2 lift that trophy? What does this team need to look like getting into the end of the year?
roster
Here's
changes.
what, you know what's weird? I'll tell you what, actually, I'll extend the olive branch to the G2 players, which is this. I do think they've been somewhat lackluster over the year because they had Monacy, specifically if you do it from that angle, because he was like every event pretty much he's been cooking, except he had the odd game at Pro League where he didn't, but who gives a fuck about that? All the big arena events, he was cooking all the time. So it's not like it's impossible. Like, if you look right now, the top end of the scene has a lot of talent, but there's not that many like locks. Like the joke is even FaZe doesn't make the final anymore. Like right now, if you look at the playoffs of a tournament, there's 4 or 5 teams that can win these events, and G2 is potentially one of them. So to me, like, you could actually do nothing and potentially be the dark horse and win. My question is just like, to actually win it and like win it convincingly and people say, right, now you're the best, you did it all. I think it's going to take too much, in my opinion. Like, because we've already seen Monacy play a peak level. Like, he can't get any better. He's pretty much as good as you can get. Niko could have some games that are better. Hunter could fix it up a little bit. I do think the main concern I do think in some ways Nexa has gotten to like fucking drift behind the HooXi topic a long time. No one really talks about whether he should stay or not. And partly because, by the way, it's why it's funny that Donna's going so hard. I actually think a lot of people like Nexa. A lot of us have goodwill towards him. I can tell you I personally do, because if you bring him on shows or DM him, he's one of those guys who doesn't even publicly or privately put up a front. He'll tell you if he thinks he played bad, or by the way, he'll tell you, I don't think I should be in IGLing. You were right about that one. He's actually a super legit guy in that sense. So I think the problem with the Nexa one is that one is hard because he seems like outside of the game, he brings so much. In the game, by the way, he seems very selfish. The problem is he's just not playing well. He's had a lot of stinker games. He's had a lot of games that were, it's not just like you're in a bad role. There's people could be in that role, would shoot people as well, mate. You know what I mean? Like, he's in some positions where he is just like a liability when he's the anchor. By the way, as a lurker, fucking hell, does he do anything? Like, sometimes does just look like he's at the back and everyone's dead. So, and by the way, he is not the player, a la JKS, that you want coming in at the end to win the 1v3. So I think he's in a very tough spot. I actually think, in a weird way, if the HooXi narrative with Kassad and Richard didn't exist, I actually think Nexa should be the one probably on the hot seat, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm with that. I mean, I think the problem is, like, you know, when they let JKS go, what did they say? They said, like, you know, Nexa will require less space and less things from us, and he'll provide good impact for the team and with less of it. And I'm like, I guess I'm like, you know, four months down the road, and I'm like, name it. Name what he's giving you that, you know, like what has he provided in this role of less space? You know, Yanko pointed this out as well when we were just kind of chatting in the green room. You know, watching G2's like Inferno is on the CT side, like Nexa and Hunter at that 8 bomb side, like they're really like, they're just, they play very similarly pretty much. They don't take a lot of space. They don't find a lot of information. They just kind of play standard spots and like let everything come to them and let the cards fall how they may. And I think like that's where I sit there and I'm like, what is he providing like that is like, you know, so critically important? Because like in his roles, and this might come down to his gameplay, like it's just having a slump or something, but like there's not much. So I mean, for me there, I'm just like, that's the one I'd train my eyes on first, and I'd go for that above all else to start with. I think you get whether G2 makes that change. Like, let's just say hypothetically, like they change Nexa instead of HooXi. Like, I think you have to get more of a performance out of Nexa in his roles. If they change, you know, Nexa out instead of and keep HooXi in as IGL, then you have to come in and have somebody who can actually be, you know, like a little bit proactive on the map and actually play those roles with a little bit of passion and have some plays that you can get into and play those roles effectively. So, you know, either way you're looking at it, you need to have like a step up in performance. But for me, I'd highlight Nexa first as like the big priority one. Like, that's, if there's a player out there that can, like, you know, without a doubt change the nature of how that role, how impact comes from his roles, I think you have to pull the trigger if you're G2.
By the way, a small detail, I mentioned it last time, but a lot of people won't know this because I actually contacted some G2 people. I have my moles inside the org, which is, he wasn't the first choice, believe it or not. I know people think because of the connection with Hunter and Niko, like, oh, they just picked up their Serbian mate. Like, it's not true. I've heard there was a few other players they were going for. They couldn't get them. And so Nexa was kind of the fallback. In fact, it was even implied maybe he's a stopgap. Maybe they didn't even know how it would go with him. And so the reason I bring that up is I don't think it's the idea that, like, Nexa's untouchable because he's Serbian and he played with some of the others. Like, I think in fact, I actually think that's the most blown part about G2. If you look at the fact that Niko was going to sign with Falcons and that they made this move that wasn't in their first one, it's actually implied that they are a lot more open to changes than people realize. It isn't like Niko made like that stupid overdrive tweet, like Niko was trying to make like a Balkan super team and it has to be this lineup. I think that's the part that seems like the straw man. Actually, it seems like if it's the right move, they will do it.
We've had our say. Now it's your chance. And also, if you read the comments and you see how many times people say minus HooXi, take a shot, see how long you stay sober. It's a fun drinking game for the weekend. and let's see how
Gonna get someone
G2
killed.
performs in London.